Okay, this one is just to recap. So the purpose of our whole existence is ultimately happiness, right? Happiness. I mean, there's no other further point apart from the ultimate end of happiness. So everything we do is ultimately towards happiness, and to know to get to this ultimate happiness which for which we were created, we need to know the tools that we have in our possession. So we need to know what are our capabilities, our limitations, where is our place in creation. So we started with creation, uh, all the things in nature which is visible to us, and we first delineated between living and non-living things. So we said living things have natural origin, so they come from another existing living thing. They grow and they decline. So and they grow, they take nutrition, and also after a certain period of time they decline and die. So this is, and they also have a structure, a cellular structure, which is further organized into organs and organ systems. And these have their own functions, and all the functions are towards the main organism, the main living being. So they, even though they work independently, they are towards that, towards the well-being of the whole individual animal. Um, so this is the difference between living and non-living things. So if we sort them out, we can see that these are living and these are non-living. And among the living creatures, we have three degrees of living creatures. So vegetative life, sensitive life or animal life, and the intellectual life, under which we fall humans, intellectual life. So we will start with the vegetative life first. And vegetative life, they have material organs. So they have roots, they have shoots, flowers, leaves. They assume material food. They take in material things into themselves and convert this material things into their own substance of their body. Okay, so they take in material things, so like water, minerals, carbon dioxide. So they take in things, and but sensitive life, that is animal life, uh, in addition to doing what the plants can do, they can take in uh, images. Okay, they take in images of the things outside them. So the plants can take in carbon dioxide and water from outside. In addition to this, the animals can take in images of what is present outside. So the dog can look at a tree and take in the image of the tree into itself. It can hear a bell and take in the so-called image of the sound. It's called a phantasm. So this is the difference between animals and plants. So last time Alan asked, so some of the plants can sense water, so they know that water is there. So the difference, I just checked, as Ron told me actually, is that the plants don't create the image of the water there. They sense, in a way, the water there, and they put out new roots there. But the plant itself does not know that there is water there. Okay, doesn't form the image of the water there. So this is the difference between the animal and the plant so-called sensation. Okay, so the assumption of into itself of the images of is called the sensation. So this image that is formed inside the animal is called a phantasm. Phantasm for vision is just the image. For sound, similarly, a phantasm is formed of the sound. We remember a sound, we can imagine a sound. Imagination is the creature itself forms the phantasm of something that is which has previously seen or perceived. Sense memory, it represents objects which are formally perceived. I'll go into more detail in this today's slides. And because animals can sense things outside themselves, they also have certain reactions, and these are called appetites or passions. They also have the power of locomotion. They have a power of movement from within themselves. Okay. Uh, Another important thing to realize, to keep in mind, is that the appetites are blind, so they always move towards the good. Okay, and they move away from evil. So towards a sensible good. Okay, so last time we said we have to remember phantasm and appetite, so we will be covering more in today's session. So I'll switch to today's session. Y'all can see my screen, or
No.
okay. I will share this to the meeting. Okay, today's, can you see? Too sensitive light.
Yes.
Okay, just a minute. Okay. So today we'll focus more on the sensitive life or the animal life in order to understand the differences that between animals and humans. Okay. So I'll just start off with Chesterton's quote again. So mankind itself seems to grow more remarkable when we compare it with the common life of nature. So today we'll compare it with the animal life. So sensitive life, we last time we saw that we have material organs, and animals have material organs. They have something called sense perception, where they can sense material things outside themselves, and they can assume images of these material things outside themselves into themselves. So these images, they can take in images. So assumes means taken. So assume images from outside. So this assumption into itself of the images of external things is called sensation. And we saw that last time that all animals have at least one sense. Higher animals have all five senses. So we'll divide this so into sense perception. The powers of animals, we'll divide it into sense perception, that is called sense cognition. And we'll also go into sense appetites or the passions. These are comparable to intellectual cognition in humans and intellectual appetite, that is the will and the intellect in humans. But these we'll cover in the next topic. Now coming to sense cognition first. Okay, so sense perception. How does sense perception work? So the scholastics use some terms like species impressed and species expressed, okay, or species impressa and species expressa. So the species impressed, you take the example of vision, it's easier. So the object outside, so a dog looking at a tree, take this as an example. When a dog is looking at a tree, the tree gives reflects light. So from the tree, there is light coming into the eye of the dog, and this is sensed by the dog, the sensation. So it forms an image in the dog of the tree. Okay, and this is taken in by the sense organs of the dog. Now the mind, it sees this image and forms a species expressa. That means it needs to be able to work on this image, to look at this image. So it forms something called the species expressed. Okay, species just means likeness. So just think of it as image expressed or image impressed. And this image expressed, species expressed, is the phantasm. Phantasm is the same as image for vision. Similarly for sound and smell and taste. So that's how we can remember a smell, that's how we can remember a taste, because of this phantasm of this taste, phantasm of the smell that is there in us, that we have. So in the senses, we'll just cover the senses, the types of senses. So first we have the outer senses, which we are all familiar with. We've learned it in school. So the outer senses are sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. So I don't need to go into much details of this. So we know this, and that should be sufficient what we learned in school. The inner senses, okay, so inner senses are the common sense, imagination, memory, and appreciation. So we know some of these. I'll just go into a little more detail. So the common sense, what is the common sense? The common sense is so from the different books that I had read, I got little slightly varying definitions, but this is what I put together. The common sense perceives interior modifications of the body. I so like my sense, I can sense where my hand is. Even though I don't like to look at where my hand is, I can sense where my hand is. If I lift up my hand, I can sense where my hand is, even though I'm not looking at my hand. So it perceives interior modifications. It also, like the feeling of hunger, thirst, all these are also interior modifications which the animal can perceive, can sense. So the common sense takes care of these. It also perceives the actions and affections of the various external senses. So the dog sees a tree, but it also uh, senses that it is seeing a tree. Okay, so it is not just seeing a tree, but it also kind of knows that it's seeing a tree. Okay, so this is the common sense. Common sense is like some books have put it as the central grid which coordinates all the other senses. It's not common sense which we use in day-to-day parlance. That's common sense. Use your common sense. It's not to be confused with that term. That term just refers to what we all should know and what is normal, right? That one. This is the common sense. So whenever common sense is preceded by the common sense, it refers to this interior sense, inner senses. Okay. The next inner sense is the imagination. Imagination is when the animal forms to itself. By itself, it forms the phantasm of sensible objects that it has previously perceived. So a dog can imagine a tree even when it's not there. The dog can, when it hears a knock on the door, it can imagine the owner outside. So this is imagination, but this is purely sense imagination. It's just of things that it has perceived before. Okay. So memory. What is memory? Memory is the animal brings back former phantasms of what it has seen before, and it represents objects which it has formerly seen. So the phantasms. So the brain, it brings back a phantasm of, let's say, uh, of the owner, a phantasm of the owner, and it represents this phantasm as uh, formally perceived. It is not that the dog is going to start, whenever it recalls the owner, it is not going to start wagging its tail. It knows that it's memory, what it has seen before. Okay. It So this is memory. The third one, which is like
One second, I
one.
think
Yeah.
we couldn't hear you there for a minute or so.
Oh, okay, okay. Where did I break off?
You were talking about that example about the dog.
With regards to imagination, is it?
I
Or
think with regard to imagination, yeah.
okay, so imagination, the animal forms a phantasm of things that it has perceived. Okay, so it hears a sound outside, it imagines that the owner is standing outside. It hears a rustle, a scratching sound, and it imagines that there is a rat behind the wall. So this is imagination, sense imagination. So it is purely for material things. Memory, the faculty of the memory, the power of memory, what memory does is it brings back phantasms that were seen before. And through these phantasms, it represents the actual object that was seen before. So the dog recalls maybe a juicy bone, and this image represents the actual juicy bone. But also, memory tells the dog that the bone is not here at the moment; it is what was there before. Okay, so this is what the power of memory is. So then we'll come to the next aspect of sense cognition, that is appreciation. It's also called estimation. So this one, the power of appreciation or estimation, it comes closest to intellectual powers for an animal. So it consists in apprehending certain concrete relations which sensible objects bear towards the sentient animal. So what it means is an animal can make a judgment, kind of judgment, sense judgment about how big a thing is or how appropriate a thing is, how far a thing is with relation to itself, and therefore it can make a comparison with some other thing. So a crow can look at a twig and it can judge that this size is correct for making its nest, although it doesn't measure and all that. It can estimate that this is correct for suitable for its nest making, the type, the size, and all that. So this is called the power of appreciation or estimation. So this sense comes closest to intellect, what is there in humans, but it's still related only to material things. Okay, it is not abstract things, but only material things. It looks at a stick and it sees whether that stick is appropriate or not. Now, because these animals can sense things outside themselves, they react to these. We saw this last time, and we know that these are called appetites. Um, and because they can react, they have some faculty of movement, locomotion. But let's go to appetites first. Okay, appetites are blind. Okay, so I mentioned this last time, but it's worth mentioning again. Appetites are blind, so they are always ordered towards a good. Okay, so a sensible good, it always moves the animal towards a sensible good. Okay, if it apprehends it as a good, if it doesn't apprehend it as a good, it may reject it or move away from it, but it always goes towards a good. So appetite doesn't make a judgment whether the thing is good or not. The senses, the brain does it, but the appetite will always move towards the good. So what are the types of appetites, sense appetites? So there are two types of sense appetites. One is called the concupiscible appetites. So we see in bold over there, and also the irascible appetites. So these are terms, but we can just simply call these concupiscible. I've heard it being used as compared to peacetime appetites. Okay, peacetime, and irascible appetites as wartime appetites. Okay, so just to help us understand, concupiscible are simple appetites. So simple things. Irascible appetites are there is a good, but there is something blocking us from the good. So we need this tendency to go towards the good despite the difficulty. Those appetites are the irascible appetites. Okay, so we will the appetites are in pairs. Okay, love and hate, desire and aversion, joy and sorrow among the concupiscible appetites. And the chief of this is love. Okay, the appetite, because all other appetites are in relation to love. Hate is the opposite of love. Desire is order towards love. Okay, we'll go through this again. But love, you remember, is the chief of the appetites. In the irascible appetites, we have hope and its opposite despair, courage and its opposite fear, and we have anger, which does not have an opposite. Okay, so we'll start off with the first pair of the concupiscible appetites, that is love and hate. So love is defined as the inclination towards a good, apprehended simply as such. So love does not say whether it is obtainable good, or whether it is difficult to get, whether it is already got it, or whether it's going to be getting that object in the future. So love is a simple inclination towards the good. Okay, so you see this picture of a dog outside a butcher shop, butcher's counter, looking at the meat pieces. So it loves the meat. So this is love. Okay, so it loves the meat. It senses the meat and it loves it. Hate is the opposite. Suppose the dog was shown a needle which it knows that it's going to get an injection, or a stick, it's going to get a beating. It knows. So it is an inclination away from that stick. Okay, so love and hate. Now desire and aversion. These are the next pair of concupiscible appetites. Desire is a tendency towards good, apprehended as a future possibility. Okay, and aversion is a shrinking back from an evil apprehended not at present but as in the future. So, a desire. This dog is looking at the meat pieces, and it has not got the meat piece yet. Okay, so it is expecting the butcher to throw one piece while as he's cutting it. So this is a desire. And abhorrence is a shrinking back from. So the master is taking out the stick. It's not yet. He's not yet hit the dog. He's taking it, but this dog is averted from it. Aversion. Okay. So this is desire and aversion. Now, what is joy? The next pair is joy and sadness among the concupiscible appetites. So, what is joy? Joy is the tendency to rest complacent in the present possession of the good. Okay, so suppose the butcher throws the meat piece, the dog is happy. Joy. There is joy. It is happy that it has possessed the good. Okay, sadness is a tendency to disquiet under the weight of present evil. Okay, so this is the dog is the master takes the stick out and he beats the dog. So the dog is sad that he's getting the beating. So this is sadness, so joy and sadness. Okay, these are the chief passions. So these are the chief emotions. All other emotions can be related to these. These are like they are the daughters of these. Okay, like for example, when we have pleasure in the success of another person who has achieved a good. Okay, so my son has come first in, let's say, singing. Okay, it's not my own. It's not that I have achieved the pleasure myself, the good myself, but it's somebody else. So this is called delight or rejoicing. Okay, so in a similar way, other emotions can be related back to these chief emotions. Okay, this is just a point to remember. So we have gone through all the concupiscible passions or appetites. So just to name them again. So love and hate, desire and aversion, joy and sadness. So these are the 6 concupiscible appetites. Now we'll come to the wartime or the difficult appetites. So the first among these are hope and despair. Okay. So we remember there's a good, but there is some difficulty obstructing us from that good. Okay. Or there is an evil and there is some obstruction from which we need to overcome to escape that evil. Sorry. Okay. So these are the irascible appetites. So the first pair is hope and despair. Hope is the tendency towards a good, apprehended as difficult but not impossible. So the dog is standing there outside the butcher shop. It is hoping that the butcher is going to throw a piece of meat to it. It's wagging its tail. It is hoping. It's looking hopefully at the butcher. Okay, so that is hope. Despair. So the dog, the master has taken out the stick to beat the dog, and he closes the door. The only means of escape for the dog, and that the dog is in despair. Okay, it cannot escape from this evil. Okay, um, or giving up in the face of good apprehended as unachievable. So the butcher shop closes, and the dog knows that it's not going to get a meat piece anymore. Okay, I hope I'm not confusing you with the examples. If anything is getting confused, please let me know. There are two dogs, huh? Just to tell you, one is outside the butcher shop, one is in the house getting a beating. Okay, so interrupt me if there's anything confusing. So this is the first pair of the irascible appetites. The second pair of the irascible appetites are courage and fear. Okay, so just give me a moment. I'll just go to another room. Okay, so courage and fear, courage or daring, is the tendency to face or fight the evils which block the attainment of a desired good. So the dog in the butcher shop, the first dog, it sees a piece of meat quite close, which it can get, but it knows that the butcher is going to give it a whack if it goes near there. So it needs some courage to go and quickly grab the piece of meat and run away. So this is courage. Fear or timidity is the tendency to shrink back in agitation when the obstructing evil is apprehended as very difficult to overcome. Okay, so there is a piece of meat, but the butcher, we're still at the first dog. The butcher he pulled out his own stick. Okay, and the dog runs away in fear because it knows that even though that piece of meat was close by and it could get it, the obstruction, that is the butcher himself, has brought out a stick. Okay, so this is fear. Now, anger is the one of is the irascible passion that doesn't have a partner. It doesn't have a what is it, opposite. Okay, and the irascible, the very word irascible comes from anger. Ire or irascible means anger. So anger is defined as a strong tendency to violent action in order to fight off an evil. So the second dog, which was at home, and it's going to get a beating, and the owner has closed the door and he's taken out the stick and he's approaching the dog to beat it, and the dog starts to bark and bite him. So this is anger. Okay, so these are the irascible appetites. So just to recap, the irascible appetites or the wartime appetites are hope and despair, courage and fear, and anger. Anger doesn't have a opposite. Um, okay, because once a good once a good is achieved, it doesn't matter whether there's an obstruction or not. So anger doesn't have a opposite. Now, another thing to note, apart from sense cognition, we have covered sense cognition, sense appetites. Another power faculty that the animals have is the power of locomotion. That means the power to move locally by reason of an immanently active principle. Basically, it means the animal itself chooses to move. Okay, not that it's moved by the wind or by some external physical force. Okay, so if I jump off the building, the action of jumping off is my choice, but the falling down is by gravity. So that I'm not talking about. That is not locomotion. Okay, so power of locomotion is I choose to move by an active principle. The dog itself chooses to move. It's distinct from appetites. Okay, so appetites, we notice that all the appetites was a tendency towards good, a tendency away from evil. So there's a tendency, but the action movement is brought about by the power of locomotion. Okay, so the faculty for going after what appetition tends towards. So when the appetite loves the meat piece hanging from the butcher's counter, the dog needs to move its legs and go and take the meat piece. So this is locomotion. So okay, we have seen that there is sense cognition, sense appetite, and there is power of locomotion. And we have seen that some of these animals, although we say that they can't think, they just form images, and by connecting these phantasms, they move, and this is what they do. Okay, but sometimes we see that bees, not sometimes, always bees make a hive. They create the hive in perfectly hexagonal shapes. They go and get their pollen and the nectar, and they make honey for the future. So that means they are thinking about the future. A dog takes a bone and goes and buries it. thinking about the future. That's what it looks like. Or a bird knows its mating season, and it goes and builds a nest, so it knows the future like that. So maybe like that it appears like that, but actually it is not. Okay, so these animals are driven by instinct. So these actions are driven by instinct. So a bird will make a nest, the same type of nest, because it knows no other types of nest making. Okay, so this is how it differs from intelligence. So this is the power of instinct, the power or an aptitude for proper guidance of their actions. So the action is guided by instinct, so which supplies the place of reason. So in higher animal like man, intellect supplies why we do things, but for animals why they do things is because of instinct. Okay, so a turtle which hatches on the beach will run towards the water. It doesn't run the other way into the hotels. Okay, it runs towards the water because I mean it is not thinking that, oh, I'm a turtle and I need to go to water, and then this one, but instinctively it knows. A sheep also, even a young sheep, will know when it sees a wolf to run away from the wolf. Okay, so this is instinctive behavior. Nobody taught. No, the mother sheep did not show a picture of a wolf and say you must run away when you see this. This is not learned. This is instinctive behavior. Okay, so it's a natural impulse that prompts animals to do what is useful for the individual and for the species, for the preservation of the individual and for the species. So this one is designed by God. So the instinct, power of instinct, is given by God. There is no other explanation for it. Okay, so this is instinct, and because we can account for all the actions of the animals by means of sense perception, formation of phantasm, and instinct, their appetite and locomotion, right? All of this can be accounted by the sense perception, phantasm, and instinct. This animal's soul, the living principle, life principle of the animal is called a soul. It's all tightly connected to matter, material things. Okay, so the brute soul, that is the animal soul, it cannot exist without the animal itself. Okay, so this one is an important point to remember because this is how we differ from an animal. So the animals, all the animals' actions can be explained by purely material things, the phantasm, the instinct, and sense perception. So this is all bound up with the material body. So the soul of the animal does not exist without the life, without the body. So because of this, an animal does not need, this animal soul does not need to be created. It is educed. It means comes out of the material body itself. So when a father dog and mother dog, they mate and they make a baby dog, that action itself produces the soul of the baby dog. Okay, and when that dog grows up, baby dog grows up and then dies, the soul dies along with the body. Okay, so this is different from humans. So animals reproduce. So that's why we say that animals reproduce, but humans procreate. There's an act of creation that's happening when humans reproduce. So when we procreate, there is a soul that is being formed. For an animal, this doesn't happen. We'll come to that later in the next session. Okay. So in the next session, we will look more at human intellect, that is human cognition, human will, that is human appetite. Human will is the appetite, and the relationship of human faculties to the animal faculties, and what we learned last time, the plant faculties. Maybe we will touch a little on human freedom, the freedom to act, which animals don't have. Okay, so this with this I will conclude the presentation, and these are the books that I refer to, and maybe we can post some other reference books also later on the group. You can read these chapters. They're quite simple to understand. Don't start from the beginning of the book. Maybe go to the relevant chapters and just read those chapters. It'll be easier. This is my tip, and I'll just close with a Hail Mary. If you'll have any questions, we can discuss them later. Is that okay? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Hail Mary, full of grace.